free spirits. Today's guest is someone who proves that it is never too late to radically reinvent your life. Jeff Weiss spent 25 years as a lawyer. He was building a career, raising a family, doing all the right things. But at 48 years old, feeling out of shape and searching for something more, he ran his first 10K. That single decision set off a chain reaction. Over the next decade, Jeff completed Ironman Arizona twice, ran a 72-mile ultra marathon, helped lead a startup through unicorn status, bankruptcy, rebuilding, and ultimately a multi-billion-dollar sale, and wrote an award-winning memoir called Racing Against Time. His story is about health span, audacity, purpose, and refusing to let age define your limits. Jeff, welcome to Flying Upstream.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really looking forward to our conversation.
Amazing. All right, let's start at age 48. So you were a successful lawyer, a father, deep into midlife. What was happening internally for you that made you say, it's time, I need to change something?
I think it was a few things. I think one, I'd really been into sports when I was younger, played college tennis, got into powerlifting after that, did that through my 20s. As we started to grow our family, the fitness part really took a back seat. Still worked out periodically, but not in a serious way. So felt that I was kind of slowing down, putting on some weight. Professionally, I wasn't fully satisfied with being a lawyer in private practice. So, kind of on the surface, everything was good, but really felt like there was more to life, both professionally and in terms of my physical well-being. And then my dad passed away when I was 47. And I think that really kind of was a wake-up call for me. I think a lot of us tend to feel like we'll get more serious about our health and taking care of ourselves when later on in life when we have more time. And it kind of hit me that later on was really now. And there was no longer, it wasn't going to be responsible to keep kind of pushing that off into the future. And so, kind of took the plunge with a running class of all things, the culmination of which was that first 10K, and that really put in motion a lot of good things in my life.
That's really amazing. I appreciate that you were able to have that moment where you thought, okay, something needs to change. I haven't been exercising and taking care of my body. And instead of saying, oh, down the road in the future, you're saying, hey, the future is actually now, right? Like need to start now. And when you did the first 10K, I mean, it feels very approachable, right? At what point did that spark turn into, I'm going to run a marathon?
It's funny. I had once told a friend years before, and probably would have said it for another year or so after that first 10K, that I was as likely to run a marathon as I was to walk on the moon. It just seemed completely out of reach for somebody like me because I wasn't a natural runner, and still I'm not an especially fast runner. But I really enjoyed the 10K enough to want to do another one, to want to try to do it a little bit faster, and did two or three just with the goal of trying to improve my time. And then started to think, you know what, actually, I'm really not that fast, but maybe I could go longer. And did a 10 miler, did a half marathon. And then, what seemed crazy at the beginning, as you took each additional step, seemed maybe not so crazy. So I didn't go from couch to marathon or couch to ultra marathon, but doing a 5K, which was the midpoint of that 2-month running class, then the 10K, then a few more 10Ks to kind of build my confidence, then that half marathon, and so on. So at each point, it seemed like, maybe a little more is possible, and which was its own great dynamic, to be surprising myself, to be climbing new mountains at a time in life where I think for a lot of us, our horizons are getting kind of narrower rather than wider. And so, yeah, for me, it was a lot of fun.
I love that you kept going because a lot of people would have done one marathon, kind of like check it off your bucket list, and then you just kind of move on with life. But you didn't. So I'm curious to know what shifted for you from just checking that box to taking it further and using it to actually build a new identity.
It's funny. That's a spectacular question. Because when I did the first marathon, that was my plan, was to do the one and to do one and done, to do one, to be able to tell myself I did a marathon, I'm proud of myself, and I can kind of check that box and feel good that I accomplished something that was really hard. Um, but then thought about it some more afterward and decided a couple things. One, I decided, you know what, I think I could have done it better. I could have done it faster. I think I'd be happier if I had done it better. But also I decided that, one and done actually, if you do something a single time, it doesn't really change who you are. And I decided that, I really actually want to be a different person. I want to be a marathoner, not just somebody who did a marathon a single time. And I've done that in other parts of my life. Like for me, writing has long been a passion. I wrote my first book back in 1998. Racing Against Time is my third. And there as well, I wanted not just to somehow pull together a single book, but really to become a writer. And to do that, I felt like I needed to do at least two and to keep doing them. So I think in some ways it was a similar process to really make it part of my identity.
I certainly can appreciate that because you're right. Doing something one time, it's great to check it off the list, but it doesn't change who you are at the core level necessarily. And certainly not if you are working towards, as you said, broadening your horizons and going in a new direction, building that new identity. And I want to call out here that you didn't just like write 2 books and stop or do 2 marathons and stop. You're really taking this to the extreme, right? So you eventually ran a 72-mile race. Now that's really, really far. That's a couple marathons there. So and I would not say that's just like midlife crisis fitness. That's really taking it to the next level. What drew you toward taking it to that extreme? Because then even after that, you're doing, even longer and more challenging races. So what in it was like, hey, this is fun, but I need to go even more?
I think once I started to climb the ladder of progressively more challenging races, it just became kind of intoxicating each time to be successful at something that I had previously thought was impossible. And inevitably, the question each time was, can I do more? Can I do something even more challenging? And so for me, the 72 miler was, I had actually tried and failed at a 56-mile race. It had strict cutoffs, and I got cut after 51 miles and 11 hours of running. But before that race, I had thought, I wonder if I could go even farther than this, and came across this particular 72-mile race, which didn't have the strict time limit. So I thought, even though it was a more challenging distance, it might actually be something I could do. And so I kind of approached it in that spirit, like, I wonder if I can pull this off. Now, since I did that, I don't actually plan to go even farther, but it was wonderful. And so now I'm just trying to find more variety, more challenges. I did a 50-mile trail race after that, I think 2 years later. But yeah, I think it's neat I think we all are capable in all spheres of our lives of so much more than we think we can do. And it's awesome to try, and it's okay to fail. And I have had my failures along the way, but I do think in life we regret the things most that we don't try. I think far more than we regret things that we tried, gave it our best shot, and it just didn't work out for us. Certainly that's been my experience. And my life has not been an unmitigated string of successes. But when I look back, the things that bother me the most are where I've kind of held myself back and didn't take a risk that I, at the time, kind of wanted to take.
Well, I really appreciate you talk about the big, hairy, audacious goals. And what was yours during this whole time for you? And why do you think it's so important for everyone to have one?
For me, I think the first one was that 56-mile ultra, which I always knew was going to be right at the limit of what I was capable of. And the idea behind a BHAG, a big, hairy, audacious goal, and it was first developed in a business context for a company that wants to really become a market leader, to set forth a goal that is at the very, very outer limits of what's possible. That's audacious. And it really kind of organizes and motivates and excites. And it was in a book called Good to Great that I read when I was first getting started in the startup world. And it occurred to me that it could apply on the individual level as well, that a BHAG, one could set one for themselves personally. And so I set that first ultra marathon, the Comrades Marathon in South Africa. That was the first one And then while I was preparing for that race, I knew there was probably a 50% chance I would fail and wanted to be able to emotionally pivot to the next thing right after. And so set a full Ironman race, 2.4 mile swim, 112 mile bike, and then a full marathon. I set that as my next goal for 2 years later, and ended up pivoting to that, and that actually worked out better than the ultra did. But it organized my training. It gave me for that entire period this wonderful feeling that there was something exciting, scary, adventuresome out there that I was getting ready for, and it just kind of added spice to everything in my life. That there's something kind of interesting happening, and something and I'm not actually an evangelist for these specific races. For me, they've been great, but I think the key for all of us is just to be bold and to find things that challenge us, that excite us, that will make us want to keep doing them, and to be physically active, and to take some ownership of kind of how we live these remaining decades of our lives, for those of us who are in, or maybe even a little bit beyond midlife.
Yeah. And while you were doing this, you were also in the middle of high stakes startup life, the unicorn valuation, bankruptcy, rebuilding, selling for billions. How did your endurance training influence the way that you handled those professional highs and lows?
I think a couple things. I think for me, I don't think it was a coincidence that the two sort of journeys happened concurrently. I do think that, in the business world, they talk about the benefits of failing and learning from failure. But truly, you don't want to be failing in business. There are lots of consequences for that. People lose their jobs, investors lose their investments. It's not a desired goal. But I think racing is a way to create the potential for failure in a very controlled and safe environment. And so for me, I have had a few failures along the way in the racing world, and it did help build that kind of grit and resilience that everybody talks about in business, and that truly is so important. I think it made me patient. I think it made me able to recognize that for the things that really matter, you have to be prepared to work hard for a long time, to be patient, but to also be consistent. And so I think the skills, the emotional skills in particular, that you need for success in both spheres are more or less the same. And so kind of drilling them, integrating them in the physical space is a good way of also kind of helping you raise your game when it comes to your professional life.
Yeah, absolutely. There's so much crossover in that. And it kind of speaks to, I think, the core values that you have. And are you someone who is willing to work hard for what you want, whether that goal is on the trail or running or in the boardroom, wherever that is? It is very similar, and I appreciate your point about that. You've also said that audacity can be cultivated as a habit. And this is a pretty powerful statement, because I think most people think that being bold is like a one-off. Like, you do it one time, you do a bold move, you sell your belongings and move across the country for a job or something like that. But how does someone build audacity deliberately?
I think a lot of it comes down to mindset. I think that for me, it's become important to me to strive and to try to test my limits, and to try to be as to try to accomplish as much as I can in whatever I'm doing, and it doesn't matter if it's the kind of partner that you are, the kind of parent that you are, the kind of professional that you are, how you take charge of your health. I think in all of it, it's good to strive for excellence, not for perfection. We'll never achieve perfection in anything, but to strive for excellence. And I think that is something that we can make a habit. So for me, and I do think in the startup world is a great example. If you want to really do great things, you do need to have a mindset that says that I'm not just going to go for adequate. I'm not just going to go for average. I really do want to, I want this company to make its mark and to be a great success. And, again, I think it's something that we should want in all spheres of our life, in the right measure. I mean, obviously, you can go too far with this. You can get carried away and become obsessive, and that's not the goal either. But, I think striving for some kind of balance, but a balance that is inclined toward striving and toward trying to really achieve some things that will make you proud.
Yeah. And you talk a lot about working hard, achieving these big, hairy, audacious goals. What role does community play in this in terms of support or help, or, it could be support for mindset or also just getting work done, right? Coaches, trainers, peers. I think especially when we think about running, most people think you just go for it. You just put your sneakers on and you just run and you do it alone. What has been your experience in terms of like support and community around you as you've gone through both the fitness journey and your professional journey?
Look, community, there's no overstating it. It's absolutely huge. And you can find it, especially in this connected world, in different ways. I think for me, I've never run with groups, though I think that would be an excellent thing to do, and I admire those who are able to do it. But with podcasts, with coaches, with groups on Facebook and things of that sort, you're always able to benefit from the kind of accumulated knowledge of other people, from the inspiration that they can provide. And honestly, it's a huge part of why I wrote the book. When I was getting started on this fitness journey, that really was one of the things that helped me so much along the way. Books by folks like Dean Karnazes and Rich Roll and David Goggins inspired me to kind of aim higher and to push my limits and to, really, it made things that I had previously thought impossible seem potentially approachable. And so, especially for someone like me, who's, I think, a relatively slow runner, my hope is that my story can be relatable to folks who, who aren't just incredibly by nature fast and accomplished when it comes to fitness and endurance, and to kind of share just the highlights and the challenges of my journey, which I think ultimately ended in a really happy place for the period that's covered in the book.
That's amazing. Tell us a little bit more about the books. You said you've written 3, and the first one was written like 2 decades ago almost.
Yeah, the first one I was in my 30s, military history. Wrote that one in 1998. The second is a biography of a particular World War II bomber pilot whose story I discovered during research for the first book, and really fell in love with his story. And then this is my first memoir, which itself was an interesting effort to get out of my comfort zone, because I had once thought that memoir was the kind of writing that I wouldn't necessarily be comfortable doing, and in the end actually found it quite satisfying to share these experiences and to kind of dig deep in terms of their impact on my kind of emotional state, which isn't something that before that I thought I would be very comfortable sharing, but in the end it actually was a lot of fun.
That's amazing. I'm also kind of curious to know what training in your 50s taught you about aging that most people get completely wrong, especially people who have been very physically active their entire lives and kind of forget.
Yeah, I mean, I think a couple things. I think, there's a lot of talk these days about health span and longevity. Longevity, basically how long we might be able to live, and health span, essentially that part of our lives where we're healthy, we're free of disease, hopefully we're fit. And the longevity piece, for me personally, it doesn't motivate me. I put it off to one side. I think there are lots of variables and factors there that I don't control, and I'm not going to worry overly much about it. But health span, we have extraordinary influence over how we age. And I think for me, and I feel like I've experienced it. I mean, I did my first Ironman at age 57, my second one at age 59, that 72-mile race in my 60s already. And I think we can have a huge impact on how energetic we are, how physical we are, the kinds of things we can accomplish through our 50s, 60s, and beyond, if we put in the work and if we're consistent. And that's an incredibly exciting thing. I think if we don't do those things, there will be decline that will be unfortunate and not truly necessary, and it'll basically make our world smaller, and take off the table things that we would otherwise want to be able to do. I think life is so much richer when we have a broader array of opportunities available to us to have fun, to connect with other people, professionally in whatever sphere it might be.
Absolutely. And I mean, for me, I kind kind of did everything right. I got married, got a good job, had kids, and now I am definitely, I admit, way behind in my fitness journey. For someone listening who's like me, kind of feels behind, maybe in their 40s or 50s, what would you suggest is the first mental barrier that they have to break?
I think to me the key, a couple things. I think one, um, the fitness stuff is first month or two, trying to find the right activities while you're trying to schedule with the goal of making it a habit. Once it becomes a habit, the emotional willpower piece really actually goes away. So you should be you should be forgiving of yourself for that first month or two, that it is going to be hard and it may seem like, I don't know how I'm ever going to do this. This isn't really who I am. But I think if you persist and really try to find activities and be open to trying different things, whether it's cycling, running, yoga, Pilates, there's just a universe of opportunities out there. But really make that effort. Try to identify some activities. Try to commit yourself to working out multiple times a week, every week for the rest of your life. But in particular, really push yourself for that first month or two until it starts to become comfortable, until it starts to become a habit. And then you will find a lot of satisfaction, a lot of happiness, and a lot less of a need to argue with yourself and persuade yourself that, yeah, I really do want to work out today. And for me, like, I don't have that conversation. It just is. And I think that's true of pretty much everybody who has made fitness a successful part of their lives, that you don't have that conversation. It's just automatic, like brushing your teeth or putting on your shoes before you go out the door.
Right. Amazing. Well, Jeff, you've shared so much, and I really want to thank you. I've got one last question for you. If someone listening right now feels that quiet tug to do something bold, but keeps telling themselves it's too late, what would you say directly to them?
I would say that life is on the other side of boldness, of taking risks, and obviously you have to be thoughtful about the kinds of risks that you take. I wouldn't ride a motorcycle without a helmet or things like that. But I think I really do believe we regret the things that we don't try, and I think that it is beneficial to imagine yourself 5 years, 10 years, 15 years forward into the future, and how will I feel looking back, and how will I judge the decisions that I'm making today. And I think that exercise will lead most of us to say, you know what, actually, I'll be disappointed in myself 5, 10 years from now if I didn't try this particular thing. And it's okay to fail. You need to, I think, lower the stakes emotionally. If you try and it doesn't work out, you try it and you don't like it, that's fine. And that still is a success. That still is an accomplishment. So, I would encourage people, don't, try to quiet that voice of doubt, that voice that puts limitations on us that aren't real and that aren't necessary, and you'll be surprised at what lies on the other side.
Beautiful. Jeff, thank you so much. This conversation has truly been a powerful reminder that reinvention is not reserved for our 20s. It takes courage to question the script, it takes audacity to rewrite it in midlife, and it takes discipline to follow through. Thank you for sharing your story, your grit, and your belief that we have more control over how we age than we think. So grateful that you came on today, Jeff. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kristen, for having me. I really loved our conversation.